inshallah tonight we'll be having our Khatm Quran. We're finishing the entire Quran. And for some of us, this might be the only Khatm Quran that we will listen to throughout the month of Ramadan. And this in itself is a great blessing. It's a great sa'adah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has enabled our youth to memorize the Quran and to memorize it in a way in which they're able to come every single night and recite it in a very beautiful and a very calm and an excellent manner. And to really understand what's going on, perhaps, or to really appreciate the Khatm Quran, perhaps we have to take ourselves back to the very beginning, where this all started, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam this blessed wahi. Can the ladies in the back, if you can please just keep quiet for a little bit, inshallah. Inshallah, we'll have our speech, our little fundraiser, and after that we'll be on our way. But you're going to have to please be quiet so that at least the brothers over here on this side can listen to it. So when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided, before he gave him the wahi, he was already becoming a humanitarian. Right? This is already in the mind of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that he was very concerned with what was going on, concerned with the society as a whole, with the oppression, with the sheer amount of oppression that was going on in that society. And he did try in his own way, in different methods. For instance, the Hajj al-Fudud, where a group of individuals, they got together and they wanted to have some sort of group to help the oppressed people, to give their haqq and their rights back. But obviously, before Prophet, Rasulullah, he realized that whatever little they do it's not enough. So this is where he decided to take a little break, and he went to the cave of Hira. And make no mistake, Rasulullah did make i'tikaf. And this is the first i'tikaf that the Prophet performed. And why that's so significant, why that's so important? Because when a person, it's very important, especially when you live in a place. At that time, for Rasulullah, he was seeing a lot of oppression, but he wasn't seeing any way out of it. He desperately needed to find a solution. And oftentimes we find ourselves in a situation similar, where we look at our own lives and we know that we desperately need a change in our own lives. We cannot continue that way. And this is where it becomes important for a person, for an individual, to take himself out of the environment that he's in, to take himself away from the people that are around him, to take himself, to remove himself completely. Because when a person does that, that's where you can look from a higher vantage point. You can analyze and see what the problem and the issues are. You can see, not only can you identify what the problems are, but you will also find a solution. And likewise, just like when we sit for i'tikaf here, they're taking themselves out of that environment, out of the everyday, out of that mundane, out of the same old routine, and they're trying to make an extra effort to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is very important, whether you do it in the form of i'tikaf or you do it in the form of going out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that element of taking yourself away from your environment is key. That's how you will have change. That's what you will find, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you that wisdom and the knowledge to do what you need to do. So while Rasulullah was there and he was out of that environment, contemplating on the society, the issues that society was facing, and the solution, which is when Jibreel alayhi came to the Prophet and he gave him the wahi. And we know the very first verses revealed were Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. In this, first of all, there are many things to take into account. Number one, Rasulullah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that he could not read and write. Right? It's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the Prophet and he didn't know that Jibreel brought this wahi, brought this revelation without knowing the Prophet couldn't read. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew the Prophet was illiterate. He could not read and write. But yet still, the first words out of anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have said, he could have introduced himself, right? He could have used, any other, introduced Islam even. But what was the first word? Well, in fact, what was the first word? Not just first words, what was the first word? Iqra. The first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, the first words, the first way, the first words in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used to grace humanity and establish that connection. And reason why there Rasulullah was given the problem, the root of the problem, as well as the solution. And that was that everything that was happening in that society, was all due to ignorance. Whether it was evil, whether it was oppression, whether it was, lewd acts, or whether it was just barbarism throughout. The main corruption and the main reason for corruption in society as a whole, why people after the death of Isa alayhi salam for the past 600 years until the Prophet ﷺ came, why they were just going deeper and deeper and further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of ignorance. And of course in that same verse is the solution. How can mankind get out of that ignorance? How can mankind solve the issues and the problems that it is facing? Education. Education is the root, is that when they say knowledge is power, it truly is power. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was trying to, when Rasulullah was there and in his meditation, giving him or showing him what the actual problem was and giving him the solution, because really in essence the Arabs after that, after the first revelation of the Quran, once the Arab they started accepting Islam. And